We have a quorum. Let me call the meeting to order. This is the panel on constitutional affairs. Item 1 on the agenda. Information papers issued since the last meeting. There has been none. Item 2, 2013 Provisional Registers of Electors and Related Matters. Let us invite the administration team to come in. SCMA, welcome to you and your team. Today we have Mr. Raymond Tam, Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, Mr. Gordon Leung, Deputy Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, Mr. Lee Pak Hong, Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Freely Chang, PAS for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, and Mr. Sham Nam Leung, Deputy Chief Electoral Officer Operations. Welcome to you all. Secretary, we are going to discuss this paper, 2013 Provisional Registers of Electors and Related Matters. The administration gave us a paper, and the Secretariat has also issued a background brief. Is it for you, Secretary, to take us through the paper, please? Certainly, Chairman. Thank you, members. In this paper, we mentioned two things that we should handle. One, the main statistics regarding 2013 PRs of electors, and two, a member has proposed expanding the use of the data and also email addresses in the VRs. I will be responding to these 2 points, and also Ms. Emily LAU wrote to our Bureau with regard to optimizing or enhancing voter registration. I will also respond to that letter. First, Ms. Emily LAU's letter says that she would like the administration to amend the electoral laws as soon as possible in order to implement the report of a consultation paper, and that is the consultation paper on optimizing measures for voter registration. One of Ms. Lau's proposal is to extend the public inspection period of the Provisional Register and also to expand the petition period. We are now working together with the REO in order to investigate into the matter. Our plan is that starting from the new legislative year, we will come back to the panel to report to members on the two inconclusive proposals in the consultation paper, namely the voter registration cycle and two VR-related crimes and penalties. These two have not been decided upon finally, but when we start the next legislative year, we will come back immediately to the panel to give you specific replies. If members would have more views on these two aspects, we're all ears. As to Ms. Lau's other optimizing measures in her letter, say, for example, that we should write better letters with better style when we communicate with the public, etc. We will actively follow up on those matters. And also, it says that there should be enhanced enforcement of the law. I'm sure the REO will follow up on these matters and will also report to members at the LegCo about people with several surnames registering with the same address. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I can ask Mr. Lee to report on this later. On the 14th of June, the administration has already issued the Provisional Register and also the omissions list. All the detailed figures are in the paper. Later on, Mr. Lee Pak Hong, the Chief Electoral Officer, will take you through the main statistics and our observations. The second point in the letter is such that Dr. Helena Wong has proposed that legislators, after having been returned, should be able to make use of the data and email addresses in the voter register. But actually, in November 2007 and also in February 2008, we have discussed the same matters. As we said in the paper, we have to consider many different factors with regard to this proposal. First of all, the restrictions of the law. Secondly, resources that you can use to contact your electors, protection of privacy information, and whether it is fair for people who intend to stand in elections, and also whether this will dampen the desire of the public to be registered as voters. We have investigated into the matter, and we are of the view that the present approach has struck an appropriate balance amongst all these factors, and it is a well-established and time-honored approach. So at this stage, we do not propose to relax the relevant guidelines regarding the use of email addresses and electors' other data. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Lee Pak-hong to introduce to you the statistics in the VRs and also our observations? Mr. Lee? Thank you, Chairman. I will take you through the gist of the paper. In June, the REO issued the Provisional Registers for public inspection. And just at the end of last month, the public inspection and petition period has ended. And now we are preparing the final register, which will be published on the 25th of this month. There are about 3.47 million registered electors in the PR, with 56,000 who are newly registered. At the same time, 53,000 electors are proposed to be deleted after the inquiry letters have been set out or who have passed away. Compared to the 2012 FR, there is a net increase of more than 3,000 electors. The overall registration rate stands at 71.6%, which is slightly lower than the other 2 years, 75.6% for 2011 or 73.6% in 2012. But compared to the other non-election years, namely 2009 and 2010, this is an appropriate figure. And also in the FCs, there are 238,000, or a reduction of 2,800. And then the DC second FC, it is still preserved at 3.19 million. After the 2012 LegCo election, the REO has continued to launch the verification measures, and also we have looked at the returned poll cards in order to check on addresses with the registration of a few different surnames. The REO will continue with our inquiry work, and we will continue to enforce the law, but then we will also factor in more flexibility in order to lessen the inconvenience caused to electors. After the inquiry letters have been sent out, 28,000 have been included in the omissions list. And then together with the 25,000 who have passed away, there are altogether 53,000 who are in the OL. 2013 is a non-election year. Usually, if it is a non-election year, we'll adjust our efforts in promoting voters' registration. But then, with our experience in previous cycles, we think that in this cycle we should step up our publicity on VR to encourage eligible people, especially young people, to get registered, and also with continuous efforts in publicity, we would like to remind registered voters to continue to update their information, especially after they have moved house. So we have increased our publicity resources in order to consolidate those two messages. In REO, we have tackled the updating of information by 110,000 voters in this cycle, mainly addresses. Compared to other non-elections, this is a figure that compares more or less with other years. Actually, in 2010 and 2011, we have tackled over 600,000 applications for change of addresses, and together with 110,000 in 2013, it means we have tackled over 700,000 people in the last 3 years, or 20% of all registered voters. I think this has to do with our publicity, which has been mounted all these years to remind people to update their addresses. And then we have seen that there is a deduction in omissions. In 2012, that was the first year when we rolled out a series of verification measures, and some voters might have found that inconvenient. And also, we have discovered, by way of law enforcement, that there have been the misregistering of addresses. In 2012, there were 1,900 such cases, but then in 2013 it has come down to 470, but still it is more than the average 200 all these years.
To a certain extent, it's probably because we adjusted the check mechanisms, we increased the flexibility, and also after rounds of publicity, the electors begin to realize the purpose and the necessity of the checks, so they are less worried. So basically, we feel that the existing arrangements and strengths are appropriate. Now, we also noticed that the 75% rate for DCE registration for young voters, basically it has increased. For those in the 28 to 30 age group, the registration rate has increased from 50% in 2007 to 59% to 2013. And at the same time, we noticed that for those in the 80 to 20 age group, the registration rate still lags the other groups. In 2013, it was only 50%, far lower than the 75% for the other age groups. In fact, before 2010, the 18 to 30 age group registration rate has always been less than 50%. So encouraging young voters to register has been a focus of our work. The REO will continue to work through different channels, through the social media for young people and the customary favorite website for young people, to remind the young voters that they are the future of our government and governance. We will be glad to answer questions from members. Question time. Yiu-chung has raised his hand. Emily LAU, Epoch Him, anyone else? Starry Lee, Dr. Helena Wong, also Sid Ho. So 5 minutes each. Yiu-chung. Thank you, Chairman. Now, to encourage young people to vote, we first have to abolish the functional constituencies. We look at the FC's registration. It's absurd. We all know it's unfair. Now, in some cases, groups consist of over 100 people barely, and some over 10,000. Now, concerning the registration, now we see that for the traditional FCs, there are 1,000 new registrations. Where do they arise? Is it the teachers, the nurses, those larger groups, presumably? And then there are 23 deregistrations. Now, where did those occur? Now, for the agricultural fisheries sector, if you remove 100 odd, then it would almost be zero. And would it be the IT sector? And we see that for the traditional FCs sector, the decrease is 2,800, so it keeps shrinking. Now, for the direct elections, we hope that there will be more registrations, but for the FCs, the number cannot increase because of the restrictions. Now, where do the new registrations arise, and how about the deregistrations, and which are the sectors where there have been most deregistrations? Mr. Lee? Now, for the new registrations and deregistrations, they occur in different sectors. In the larger sectors, for instance, the teachers and the social welfare sectors. There have been substantial numbers and also significant number in the IT sector. So it's quite even, or in a number. It occurs in a large number of sectors. Now, on the 2,300 deregistrations, now some of them for the GCs, they would occur correspondingly in the FCs, and some have 1,200 have transferred to the DC, the second group, and so that accounts for the total 2,800. Now, for the 2,300 deregistrations, can you give us a table? We know the agriculture and fishery sector, they are small in number, but do we see large number of deregistration there? Can you give us a table? Now, this is provisional register figures. Now, since 16th of June, we have received more data that we are currently dealing with. Now, for the traditional FCs, we will submit the changes to the panel. Ms. Emily LAU? Just now, the Secretary said that he would consider implementing our proposals for the next legislative year. Now, I hope you would allow more time for people to make checks and claims. Now, maybe he wants to consult again. Now, we already reached consensus earlier. Are you going to embark outright, or do we have to go through rounds of consultation? Also, of course, we wish to have large enough registrations. Now, the voters all like the process to be more green. Now, because the landfills are getting too large, now will you encourage electronic registration? Right now, the rate is still quite low. You have to do more to attract people to register electronically, and then in the future you would get all the data electronically, and that would be more environmentally friendly. And also, can you tell us, have there been a large number of cases of one letter per household? Now, do you have the data on that? And what can you do to encourage the voters, even if they do not adopt electronic means, they would accept one letter per household, and that would be more green. Now, concerning the claim cycle, we have to, and the penalty issue. Now, with the consent of the chairman, at the first panel meeting of the next legislative session, we will table the matter to the panel. Usually, the first meeting would be in November. There wouldn't be further consultation because now on environmentally green procedures, we continue. We are still. We are in agreement that we should adopt electronic means. I'm still not happy with the 12% rate. The REO is working through different channels. I would like to invite Mr. Lee to brief us on the promotion in this regard. Of course, if you have further views on what more we can do, we would encourage that. Now, one letter per household also, please. Now, about 400,000 voters have submitted their email addresses for these, and about 1 out of 2 voters is willing to provide their email address. And also on our website, we have a convenient system whereby a voter, once he is registered and he has supplied an email address, if he wants to update the email address in the future, he can do it on the website. And we will monitor the existing situation and draw from our experience to make it more convenient for the voters to update their email addresses on 1 letter per household. Now, in the past, in the 2012 legislative year, we adopted that for the first time. It has been very successful. Over half of the voters are agreeable to that, and in the future we will continue to do more publicity and encourage more candidates to adopt this means. Now, some candidates are concerned that some voters may not get the message under 1 letter per household. We will do more publicity for the voters. And on the candidate side, in the future, we will do more to facilitate the process of 1 letter per household. Now, on email, did it ever happen that the email address was incorrect and the message could not get through? This problem has always existed. As for the correspondence addresses, now in the future, a voter might change his email address after it was first applied, and he might not have notified us. So we call upon the voters to update their physical addresses along with their email addresses. Mr. Yiu-chung. Thank you, Chairman. Now, concerning the replies by the administration and Mr. Lee, now the public are being more adjusted to the enhanced check mechanism, and I think there can be more enhancements. Now, in the latest elections, there still have been cases where voters arrive and then find that they are not on the register. The registrations have been revoked, and they have not previously indicated that they want to be deregistered, and they just have been removed from the list for some reason or another. Now, this is not new. Now, my suggestion is, I don't know whether you have been doing this. What now? After you have after you deregister a voter, now right now you announce that. Now, leaving aside those who are deceased, can you issue one more notice to them so that they have the opportunity to do something in the 2 months after they learn they have been deregistered, so that they can register anew once they find that they have been deregistered for whatever reason? Can you enhance the procedure in this regard? Secretary? Now, Mr. Yiu-chung's suggestion, in effect, now is to extend the 2-week period for check to 2 months. Now, so as I mentioned earlier, we will come back to you in November to explain to you our ideas. Now, apart from the 2-month period for check and claims, now there are other ways for the voters to check whether they have been removed from the register. Now, they can call the REO, the number that begins with 2891. Now, you can do that at any time. You can make the check by phone. And in the medium term, we hope to use technology to facilitate the checking. I hope that these additional measures will help the voters to learn their registration status. And once they are on the omissions list, that means the REO has been unable to contact the voter through different ways and means. And so in the past, if the contact failed after rounds of follow-up, then even a further letter would not be that helpful. Now, the touch-off point is triggering point. Now, is that the person has not received any notice and only finds out when he arrives. So the triggering part is that he doesn't know.
But then it's important that he knows there is such an opportunity. Of course, the opportunity may mean that he will find nothing in the end. However, voter registration and voting right is an important right for the people. So you have to be even more careful. Resources permitting, you should do this even more carefully. Maybe Mr. Lee can add a few words. Mr. Lee. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, what Mr. Yip said could happen. We have had such cases. Even if we've sent out many letters, the voters may not receive them. It may be because the information in the register as it stands is incorrect. Maybe the flat number, the story number may be wrong. It is all right for the voter to go and vote because the registration is there. However, this voter is not going to receive mail from us. As the SCMA said, we might have sent out a few letters to the voter. And at the same time, we have also mounted publicity that these people can call our election hotline in order to check his or her own information. And also before any major election, we'll always stress that there will be a poll card sent out to each voter. If within a certain time you do not receive the poll card, you should call a certain number, and then immediately they will know whether the registration is still valid and whether the address is correct. If it is found to be incorrect, he can correct it immediately with the REO so that in the next election, the correct information will be reflected. Ms. Darley, Chairman, I'd like to respond to what the officials have said. Actually, when it nears any election, there will be such complaints. I don't think they are just sporadic cases. Every member has had that kind of experience. Near the election time, voters will find out that their registration has been deleted and they have not received any letters telling them. So I don't think your reply was good enough. Next, I'd like to ask a few questions. The registration rate of the different age groups. Have you looked into the registration of ethnic minorities? Are they on the low side? Are you going to add more languages to the voter registration form? Number 2, gender. I don't know whether you have looked into the gender ratio. Number 3, deletion of voter registration. We now have higher and higher requirements of the accuracy of the voter registers. I think one of the reasons why there are inaccuracies is that elderly people who have passed away might not have been notified to the REO. I don't know whether you have sought any understanding with the Immigration Department so they can automatically let you know about deaths of voters so you can immediately also delete the registration so the register is more accurate. Number 4, I'd like to talk about the DC second FC. When I did publicity, many voters did not know that they could choose an FC. now you say there are the attending changes. Some of the FC voters know, but how in your publicity have you emphasized this point so that people have made the appropriate choice before the deadline? Mr. Lee. Thank you, Chairman. Ethnic minorities. Every time before a major election, we will make use of NGOs to do publicity with ethnic minorities. We would use their languages in the publicity materials concerned. Our registration forms are only printed in Chinese and English now, but NGOs also do what they can to assist. And in fact, we ask them for assistance if there is a need. And that is when members of the public have difficulty filling out the forms. In our data bank, we do not have separate figures for ethnic minorities because we only have the names in Chinese and English and the addresses. And therefore, this is not very comprehensive information to let us know whether a person is of an ethnic minority. In terms of gender, we have always paid attention, and now the registration rate for men and women is more or less the same, but that for women is a little higher. And for those who have passed away, in every registration cycle, we do checking with the Immigration Department. The Immigration Department has the information of all people who have passed away, so we will look at the information to know who have passed away, and if indeed a family member has passed away, then a voter can also furnish the information directly to the REO. And then the DCFC, you remember in 2010, that was the first time when we introduced the DC second FC. We sent a letter to all people in Hong Kong telling them the delineation of this FC and that they have a choice. That is, if they are eligible under a traditional FC, then they should make a choice. That letter contained very clear information. And also before the 2016 LegCo election, we might do the same publicity again to explain the composition of the DC second FC. Ms. Lee, any follow-up? If not, Ms. Sitho. Chairman, I'd like to ask about the omissions list of 2012 and the numbers. The administration gave us the figures. However, if I look at Hong Kong Island, there were 40,000 people who have been deleted. And if we look at the paper today, in para 8, there are the people asking for deregistration, but I'd like to ask about these 40,000 for Islands District and also those in other districts. Now that the election has been held a year ago, have you found out why they have been deleted and how many of them have been reinstated in the register? The percentage is not small. Originally, there were 640,000, but now not even 610,000. In para 3 of your paper, you quoted a figure of 25,000 who have passed away and then 28,000 who did not update or confirm the latest residential address. Altogether, only 50,000. However, there were tens of thousands who were deleted in every district during the election. Did you do follow up to see why these people did not reply to your letters and how many have actually passed away or how many did not do the registration again because they found it inconvenient? If you compare para 3 and para 8, I don't think the figures tally. There are many other people who have been deleted. Where have they gone? SCMA? Thank you, Chairman. Let me quote a few figures. In 2013, in the Provisional Register, as the paper says, there are 56,000 who are newly registered. About 6,300 were deleted GC members before 2012. In other words, we deleted about 200,000 last year, and out of which only 6,300 have registered afresh. We do not have any scientific method to explain why the 200,000 have chosen not to register again. We should all have received at the beginning of the year letters to encourage voters to register or to update their addresses. That letter has been sent to all households in Hong Kong. But if this is still the result, then the only reason that we can infer is that the deleted voters have moved house a few times these few years, and they have not updated addresses. They might not be living in Hong Kong anymore, or they choose not to register again. And as I said, we would know the information about those who have passed away from another channel. So the only thing we can deduce is that these voters did not want to register again, or that they are out of Hong Kong. Mr. Lee, anything to add? I'd like to add one point. In 2012, we deleted 210,000 voters. If they had wanted to reinstate their registration, they would have to fill out a form and submit it to REO so we can include them in the 2013 register. And all these are voluntary. We have mounted a large-scale publicity campaign, as the Secretary said. I believe these people have moved house and their address in the register is not their existing address. Some of them actually got our letter and phoned us to say they did not want to register. So we could only depend on our publicity efforts to encourage these deleted people to get registered again, and we have to respect their wishes. Altogether, there were 210,000. Well, if they were all rigged votes, we would applaud you. But if you have wrongly deleted these voters, then you might have affected or impacted on the voting results. And you say they might have moved house a few times, so they could not get your letter. However, if they would register again, then if it is the same person, even if the address is not the same, you can check him out. 210,000 would mean a big enough figure out of the 3.22 million registered voters. I don't think you should just delete their names and then if they do not register again, then that's it. I think you have the responsibility to find out why. Have they all passed away? Or is it that there was a wave of immigration, so suddenly 200,000 people have disappeared from Hong Kong? You should look for the reasons why, so that you know how many you have wrongly deleted in 2012. Dr. Helena Wang. So sorry, Chairman. They would have to say yes or no. SCMA. Chairman, we said in our paper that for those who have passed away, that figure we know because the Immigration Department gives us the information. Those were 25,000 or 12% of the 200,000. So the others must have been those who have not updated their addresses, or that they were out of Hong Kong, or as Mr. Lee said, they chose not to register again. I believe there would be some. As Ms. Sito, she mentioned vote rigging. In the past, we have conducted a number of measures in order to enhance and confirm the accuracy of the voters' registers. All these measures might have caused some people to think that this is too inconvenient. And in fact, the next major election is the DC election in 2015, so they might not have the desire to get registered again for the moment. But we will listen to the views of Ms. Ho, and we will work together with the REO to see how we can dig up the background reasons, and next time when we do our publicity again, we can do more targeted things in order to reach out to these people. Next, Dr. Helena Wang. Thank you, Chairman. SCMA postage will increase. We of course understand that the VR and the email addresses, when they were collected, would have to be used just for election-related matters. That's the purpose of collection. But after the election, it is important for members returned to always liaise with their voters. Privacy, of course, is important. And of course, when the information was collected, there was no consent given by the voters that the information could be used after the elections. Now, only 12% of the electors gave their email addresses. I have this question for you. Have you considered expanding the collection of email addresses? And while you do so, can you also ask them whether they would agree to having their email addresses used for that purpose? One, to receive election advertisements. Two, to allow members to contact them and to send out work reports using their email addresses.
If in the next expansion of voters' registration and collection of email addresses, if you take this step, asking them for permission to use the email addresses for these purposes, and if they have indicated their wishes, then the members can have a legal channel for these purposes in the future. Now, concerning to the 12% who have supplied their email addresses among the registered voters, now after a member is elected, if he sends an email to ask the voter, are you willing to let this email address be used for contact with a certain member, so would that be legal procedure to get the consent or otherwise? Secretary, now according to the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance, when we collect any information, we must state the purpose of the collection, and then the data must be used for that purpose. Now this is the arrangement in the PDPO. Now, in the document, we probably also mentioned, as I said earlier, now apart from the existing requirements under the law, we are concerned that for some people who did not participate in the previous election, might it be unfair? For instance, between the two elections, for those who participated in running, they might have the email addresses for publicity. However, the other candidates only joined the political process in the interim, and they do not have the email addresses. They might be at a disadvantage. Now, because of this major concern at this stage, we do not support relaxing in this regard. On the other hand, we find that through the administration department, we have certain resources for LegCo and DC members to submit their work reports to the general public, and many members have their own Facebook and own websites. Now, these are also good channels for contacting the voters. Now, I have seen some of these Facebook pages myself. So these alternative technical means are available, and this would not affect the fairness of the election process. So at this stage, we do not favor a relaxation. Dr. Wong? Now, this argument doesn't quite stand. Of course, we support fair elections, but we know that incumbent candidates do enjoy an advantage. This is true the world over. Now, if the existing members have almost $200,000 of expenditure limit per month, and they have networks in their constituency, they already enjoy an advantage. The Secretary, I hear Dr. Wong's point. Now, in fact, we also considered whether to offer it universally for fairness. Then we might not even have the 12% because members of the public might be worried that they get a lot of junk mail every day. Next, Mr. Raymond Wong. Now, looking at paragraph 6 of the document on the registration rate for young voters, which has been declining. Now, it's a slight decline. Of course, this is not an election year, so the wish to register may be on the low side, but this also applies to other age groups too. But the government hasn't done enough in publicity. How do you promote to the young voters, those who are over 18 or those who are in secondary school? How do you publicize the matter to them? Maybe the administration doesn't want the number of voters to increase. Now, have you learned from the experience of neighboring countries? Can you give us their registration rates for different age groups? And also, on the VR personal particulars, including email addresses being used for contact, I have reservations about that. Now, this may provide means for contact with the constituents for existing members, but there will be problems. I find there are at least 8. Now, first, fairness. Now, existing parties can use the data to approach voters, and they become at an advantageous position compared to the other parties. Now, those large parties with DC members will be at a big advantage. Now, those who make use of the Super DC to run elections, now they get two opportunities to engage in publicity. Now, I already mentioned this point previously in the panel, but I am one of the few proposing this, and I was not supported. Now, so this is something we want to avoid. This is unfair in design. Now, the DAB, there can be an association of different DAB members and the independents, and the small parties lose out. And also, the voters understood that the information is going to be used for the elections. So unless the government gets their consent, then it would be an invasion of their privacy. Now, if they knew this proposed use beforehand, they might not have supplied the email address. Also, administratively, this should not affect voters' registration adversely. The more complex the system, the less people are inclined to vote. Now, also, what use are the email addresses to LegCo members? We should all go to the districts and meet them. What's the use of the email addresses? Now, you want the FC mode to apply in DCs. Now, also, there should be the check the period, 15 days period for checking is too short. Now, we think that the procedures should be practical. Otherwise, it's not meaningful. So the period should be lengthened. 2 more points. Now, we shouldn't rule out the possibility of automatic voter registration. Now, you might have to overcome that in the DC elections, and that would make things more convenient for the CE elections. Now, right now, so for administrative reasons, some voters cannot vote. Now, 16th of May, that's the DC election period starting date. Now, so once someone has registered, the member fails to be elected, so what's the point of registration? So this arrangement now in relation for those who are over 18, now the government says that those who are ordinary resident in Hong Kong and over 18 have the right to vote. That doesn't rhyme with that. Now, the automatic voter registration provides a solution. Now, even if you don't promote the automatic registration, you should study the feasibility of other means. Now, the questions are quite long, but it offers different point of view. Secretary, on the registration of young people, now for the neighboring regions or countries, we do not have the data on hand, but we'll try to get them. Now, I agree with the 4 points by Mr. Wong. Now, as for the 2-week period, whether that should be lengthened, we will come back to you on after the summer. Now, on automatic voter registration, we will look at that too. Now, under our registration system, for those who are 18 and are ordinary resident in Hong Kong holding ID card, we would have the address now, and we will also consider Mr. Wong's point and then come back to the panel. The Secretary is in agreement with your points. Now, that's quite rare. Dr. Priscilla Leung, I'm concerned also about the 200,000 odd voters who have been deregistered. Now, if they've passed away or they have emigrated, now the immigration department would be quite able to find out. Now, in other cases, there may be administrative errors, or somebody has traveled abroad and then missed it, or the domestic helper has misplaced the letter. Now, last year and the year before that, we said that if Hong Kong people are resident in the mainland, well, I saw some recent cases of that. For instance, the wife is a mainland resident. Now, Hong Kong resident lives in Shenzhen. A lot of the time, he has no fixed address in Hong Kong, so he's not concerned. He's not sure whether he is eligible to vote. So he didn't reply to your letter. So he is deregistered. In other cases, elderly people might have moved to live on the mainland, especially in Guangdong province. Now they watch Hong Kong TV. They never imagined that they would lose the right to vote. Now, how would you provide assistance to them? Now, out of these 200,000 odd persons, I think a lot of them are these cases where they really lost the right to vote wrongly. Now, some people work on the mainland, but their homes might be still in Hong Kong. Now, you should have clearer guidelines and inform them that they are still eligible to vote. Now, under what circumstances they lose the right to vote and they have not emigrated. So it all needs to be clarified for them. Now, we, as former candidate, we receive CDs and we get our own technical staff to arrange the data. Now, certainly it won't be difficult for you. Maybe some people have moved and there's vote rigging, 10 odd people at the same address. You should be able to find out you check more diligently, and you wouldn't, and in that case, you wouldn't wrongly disqualify some people from voting. The Secretary.
I think there are two batches of people. Some just do not update their addresses after moving house. According to present laws, they can still vote according to the registered address. But after checking, and if there is no reasonable explanation and if there is no proof, and then they do not update their addresses either, then indeed they will be included in the omissions list. Therefore, if there are such situations, we do use different publicity channels to encourage the public to update their addresses. But I also know that because of change in social circumstances, many Hong Kong people did leave Hong Kong to work or to spend their retirement, as the member said, in Guangdong province. As to whether someone is ordinarily resident in Hong Kong, it is a legal question. My understanding is that under the law, you can be ordinarily resident in more than one place. And secondly, it's a factual question. It depends on the individual cases. Generally speaking, I'm really making a general statement here. If a Hong Kong PR has left Hong Kong and settled down elsewhere, and if there are no connections between him or her and Hong Kong, then he could be regarded as not ordinarily resident in Hong Kong. But if the PR has lived and worked in Hong Kong for a long period of time, and because of various reasons he has moved out of Hong Kong, however, he has maintained a reasonable contact with Hong Kong, say, for example, work connections or family connections, or in certain circumstances, he can be reasonably be regarded as having connections with Hong Kong, then I'm sure the REO can accept that he still is eligible. But as I said, as I explained many times in the past, every case is unique. So I cannot make a broad brush statement, but generally speaking, it depends whether he has maintained connections with Hong Kong. Chairman, I really like to explain very clearly. Just recently, I have seen this person who is very active in Hong Kong. He works in Hong Kong, but he goes back to Shenzhen because his wife lives in Shenzhen. There are these young men in this situation. Can you not print some booklets to detail the basic information? These people, of course, have connections with Hong Kong. He will be eligible to vote, and there is a big number of such people. You also have to help the elderly people. Your reply just now is too complicated. You mean the elderly people should take you to court? They would just watch TV, and if the information is too complex, they would say, I'd rather not bother. Maybe you should launch a new guideline, and then you should outline the very simple situations. And I'm really talking about Hong Kong PRs living on the mainland. I remember you said before that if these people commute to Hong Kong on a daily basis to work and they maintain close liaison with Hong Kong, even if they do not have a permanent address in Hong Kong, they can register their living, the address that they stay in when they are in Hong Kong. For example, their family member's address. That's correct, Chairman. But Mr. Lee is the authority. According to the law, he makes the decision. Maybe Mr. Lee can explain. Thank you, Chairman. I think the SCMA has clearly explained the interpretation of the law. We have these concrete examples. As Ms. Priscilla Leung said, we have come across such situations also. Maybe the applicant spends most days in a month to live, to work, to do business, or to study. But he comes back to Hong Kong every month for some days, and he can also provide an address for registration. As the SCMA said, this is a factual issue. We will look at the facts of a case, and then we'll seek legal advice from the DOJ. In fact, these cases would generally meet the legal requirements because he can really provide a genuine Hong Kong address, and he can satisfy us that he has very close connections with Hong Kong. The actual operation, therefore, is that when we tackle such cases, we have to look at the facts of each case. I cannot generally say that some kind of situation would definitely comply with the law. Every time we seek legal advice from the DOJ. Chairman, just one more word, a very short one. I would still want you to issue a guideline. The guideline is that he can genuinely give you an address. Well, sometimes they do not have family members in Hong Kong and they want to use a friend's address, but then in the end they might be found guilty. When you say all cases would go to the DOJ, people just wouldn't bother. I think you have the responsibility to make this simple, or else nobody would like to lend the address to another one. I think it would be difficult for them to write a guideline. It's all right for you to ask for it. Well, they are paid to do it. They cannot dismiss it as difficult. We can make the requirement. You don't have to make life easy for them. I'm not making life easy for them. I'm just predicting what they are doing. Well, they are paid, and I think we can make our requirements known. They have not said no. As under another point, Ms. Emily LAU also mentioned whether the letters we send out to voters should not be so legal in nature or legalistic in language. In fact, this is a dilemma. If we need to issue a guideline on the eligibility of voters, I'm afraid we might have to use legal language, and it might not be very easy to comprehend. And if you write a letter which can be comprehended by all age groups, then it might not be a very legally responsible way to do it. So it might be a complex issue. Ms. Priscilla Lee has always asked the administration to write a clear guideline. But I think you all understand that legally, these are not just a question of law. It's also a question of facts. So we really have to look at the facts of each case. That is why I already said that we should look for connections, and I was really trying to propose a general viewpoint. In fact, it is not the be-all and end-all because it is a complex matter. That is why my prediction is correct. Well, I hope I'm not correct. Mr. Paul Chair. Chairman, there are many ways to solve problems. You can reduce complexity to simplicity, but no matter what guidelines you draw up, you will not be able to tackle the basic issue. I think I've mentioned this before. I hope it is not really out of the way, but I believe it represents a major reform. When you have time now before you conduct constitutional reform consultation, you can give more thoughts to this. First of all, the entire paper seeks to say that we should encourage more people to get registered and to vote, right? You won't object to that basis. As Mr. Wong Yok-man also said, the most simple way to do it is that all PRs who have an identity card should be eligible to vote. There are just 7 million odd. Look at Australia. They have 20 million people and they do it that way. Why can't we do it? If you look at Cap 177, capital A, Section 18, birth and death registration bylaws, it is said that you should inform the Immigration Department of any changes. And under 41B Roman 4, it says that if you change address, you should also inform the Immigration Department. But then we have not enforced it. And then subsection 10, the change in occupation. So in fact, the ID card is very functional, but we have not fully implemented this registration system. If we want to encourage more people to get registered, and if we have the ID card system, then, and also another thing can be established. If we have the ID card system and the voter registration system, of course you're duplicating a lot of resources. Why don't we combine the two? Number 4. In the past, it was said that we could allow people to choose. Well, when they register for ID card purposes, they can also signify their consent or otherwise to be a voter. Why do you want people to register again as voters? And then you have to verify their identity, and Priscilla Leung wants a guideline, etc. All these are duplications, and you are not resolving the problem. I hope you will give some hard thoughts on this. Later on, we are going to have universal suffrage to return the CE and also the LegCo. Everything is going to be universal later on. I believe now you should spend time on this. This is not as controversial as constitutional reform, and we are talking about waste reduction at source. This is the best way to do it. Don't have two systems. Don't always seek to print guidelines or pamphlets. If you really want to make Hong Kong elections quality elections, you should encourage people to get registered without having them go through such complicated procedures. And also you do not have to print pamphlets and post pamphlets. And the SCMA said that emails might be too disturbing. Well, practically, if you live in public housing estates, your door is always knocked on. Many people come to visit you unless you live in private housing. So why can't you improve the system so we have more democracy? Secretary. I'd like to thank Mr. Chair for his views. I think some of those can be taken back for further consideration. I'd just like to add a point. The Immigration Department does complement our work in two aspects. As we mentioned at the beginning, if there are people who have passed away, we will be informed and the register will be updated. At the same time, our EO staff also are stationed at the Immigration Department and to encourage young people who are registering for an adult ID card to get registered as voters. And in fact, we have been able to register quite a number of voters in this way. As Mr. Wong Yok Man mentioned, I will go back and talk to the REO to see whether we can do what overseas countries do, and that is they take proactive ways to encourage young people to register. I thank you for your reply, but I am telling you, you don't have to do it. Those who become of age, those who reach the age of 18 should automatically be registered. And also, you should implement the law more strictly, that when people move house, they should inform the Immigration Department and yourselves, or else they should be subject to the penalty of $10,000 and imprisonment of a year, unless you don't want people to register. SCMA, any more replies? I will go back and study the issue, and perhaps I can come back to consult your views again. My impression is that when I tackled vote rigging, we considered this matter. My impression is that the Birth and Death Registration Office, and also with regard to addresses, these might not tally totally with the election laws where the address should be the prime and permanent address. And these two may be different legal requirements. This is a real issue. But we can go back and see whether we can streamline the procedures. I will go back and talk to the DOJ afterwards. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, you were out of the room. Now it's your turn.
No. The making voting an obligation, that would be the best solution. One would be fine if he doesn't vote. Now, this is a matter of political philosophy. So, Mr. Raymond Wong and Mr. Paul Chair are right. We should have automatic registration. This, of course, has electioneering implications. Of course, some dead people might have their name still on the list. Somebody might make use of their ID number. Now, but that would be difficult in Hong Kong because Hong Kong is a small place. The risk is low. It's very difficult to get the dead person's ID card and vote. Now, secondly, now you might be over 18 and automatically become a voter. Now, I thought about this as well. You have to resolve the matter. Have you thought about how to resolve these two issues, the deceased persons and the large-scale change of constituencies? Now, if in the future half the votes are by political party, then it wouldn't matter in which district you vote. Now, the key issue is, I think you really do not want that many people to vote. That's the simple explanation. Because many people, like my supporters, they want to support me, but they are not registered. Now, I understand that. Yeah, Paul Chair. Now, the pro-establishment camp are very eager in doing this network activities. Now, we haven't settled on future reforms, so it's difficult to talk about the matter. I think anyone over 18 should automatically be qualified to vote. That would be the fairest. Hong Kong is a small place. Dead people voting is unlikely to occur, and voting in two districts is also unlikely. Also, the Super DC, right? The DC second FC, is it that one resigns and then everybody has to be re-elected? One person resigns and the entire FC has to be re-elected? Mr. Leung asked about dead people voting and indiscriminate supply of addresses. Now, as I said earlier, if someone is deceased, the information would be updated in a timely manner in our system. Now, on indiscriminate or inappropriate reporting of addresses, now we have adopted many measures to ensure that the information in the VRs are up to date. Now, when we embark upon these administrative measures, now some people initially asked us to do more checking, including people in the political parties, and later they said that we don't have to be so strict. So based on our experience, we will adjust the level of our efforts to try to strike a balance. Now, on the DC second FC, now according to existing laws, if one member resigns, then the electoral officer will have to declare a vacancy and then has to be a by-election. Now, there would be about 322,000 who are qualified to vote right now. Dr. Chen Carlo. Now, I would like to follow up on an issue that's not quite dealt with in the document. How many people have attempted to vote but were unsuccessful or who have been refused registration? Now, a member sought guidelines just now. Now, the issue is how many cases are there. Now, in voters' registration campaigns, then the political parties and the LEO would provide assistance, and if something is wrongly written or incomplete information is supplied, then the registration fails. Now, of course, I would prefer automatic registration, but we have the traditional FCs. Now, there would be vote rigging easily. Now, there would be a small number of voters, like in the agriculture and fishery sector. So you have to turn them down. This would be have to be part of the public education. Mr. Lee? Now, such cases do occur, but they are very rare. I do not have the figures on hand, but I can supply them later. As I seem to recall, there are very, very few cases, maybe in the double digits. Now, usually it's because the applicant is found out to be not a permanent resident, or we have questions about his address and he could not provide address proof. So we turn down the application. Now, after we disclose the provisional register, the person can check and make a claim or declaration. Now, when he resupplies the information, now with the consent of the officer, we would add the name again to the register, but there are few such cases. So in the first case, you turn them down and they appeal, and then you check and recognize their eligibility. Now, if we do not put them on the register, there must be sufficient grounds. First, he might not be a PR, or he cannot verify the address supplied. Under those two circumstances, we will turn down the registration. Now, for the traditional FCs, the voters who are not natural persons, now that is even more clear. Now, for every application, we would check with the organization to see whether it's an eligible voter. So it's 100% checked. It's unlike in GC elections. For GC elections, we have to check whether he is a PR and whether the address is valid. Now, members twice mentioned the agriculture and fisheries sector. I think that may be misleading to the public. Now, even if the member of the agriculture and fisheries sector is deceased, there is still a right to vote by the representative. Now, it's equal participation. That's an example of it. Now, there is also historical reasons. So when the members make the comparison is inappropriate, or they may have insufficient knowledge about the system, or they might even be misleading people on purpose. Now, every election system has both pros and cons. We have to maintain an open mind. Now, I'd like to ask the government, how do you promote to the public the knowledge that whether they are eligible to vote and how to vote, especially for traditional FCs? And how do you explain to the public what the FCs mean, so that the people get a good idea? Now, let me again cite the agriculture and fishery sector. Now, there are reports in the newspapers today about the constitution of the sector in coming elections. Now, these sectors make contributions to the economy, and in future development, they may have to move with the times. Now, for instance, Mr. Ho asked how we would encourage people to vote and how to promote their contribution. Now, the latter is easier. In some sectors, it's all organizations who are voters, and then it's so if it's all natural persons, then we would have do the promotion in a different way. So I think this issue will recur in the future, and I hope we do not have to get an answer today. We can leave it till later. Mr. Chen Chi-chun. Now, I'd like to come back to the low registration rate for young people. Now, the administration probably hasn't done enough in publicity. The publicity period may be too short. Now, it seems that the advertisements are seen only for a short time. I want to go to the districts and help people get elected, but there's insufficient time. Now, would you devote more resources this time round? And also, the publicity is rather run-of-the-mill. You have a couple of ads in the TV, and you do some promotion in the malls. But if we have automatic registration, then no publicity is required. So I support automatic registration for anyone over 18. Alternatively, when one gets his ID card at 18, you can ask him to give consent, and then it will become effective. Now, concerning the address and the geographical area, now in 2017, the CE elections there will be no geographical constituencies. So if someone then wishes to register his address, can that be done? Now, for the universal election of the CE, the arrangement for electors is now being studied internally. We have studied the experience of other countries, and they have different requirements. In smaller places, the residency area is more strict, but for something like CE elections, it's less strict. And we are doing the study, and when we have some conclusions, we will discuss with you in the panel. And the main consideration, as Mr. Chen Chi-chun said, in the universal election for the CE, on where the elector lives, the need is less than for DC elections. Now, as for publicity to youngsters, Mr. Lee, the registration of young people has always been a concern to us. We attempt different methods. For instance, the websites and social media frequently used by the young people. And in recent years, we visited schools. We have staff who talk to the students in the higher forms of secondary schools. Hopefully they will be willing to register upon attaining the age of 18. Now the registration of voters can be done all year round. It's an annual exercise. So I hope the districts can help us in this regard. Now, for the government, whether it's an election year or not, we have to step up our efforts. Usually, we do the publicity about in the month and a half before the candidates have to be registered. Now there is flexibility. Now we may lengthen the period or make some adjustments.
As for publicity, as I said, this is a non-election year. However, we have stepped up our efforts. In the past, it is just $2 million that we spend in a non-election year, but we raised it to $6 million this year. If it is an election year, the expenses would exceed $10 million. In 2015, 2017, in that cycle, those are 3 years that mean an important stage in our constitutional development, and we will be putting aside more resources for staging publicity and early stage. As for those who reach the age of 18, we have cooperated with the Immigration Department at the registration for births and deaths. Whenever an 18-year-old registers for an adult ID card, we have a counter there to invite these eligible young adults to fill out the voter registration form there and then. That is the main channel for us to enlist young candidates. Why is making it compulsory so difficult? Just ask them to put a tick in a box. Well, that depends on the cooperation between the two departments. Those two are different statutory procedures. Whether the two can be combined has been replied to by the SCMA. We can spend some more thoughts on it, but right now those are two separate statutory procedures. 3 more would like to have a second round, but we have another agenda item. If the 3 of you want to carry on with your questions, you would have less time, just 3 minutes each. All right, we'll have to go into item 3 right away after that. Second round, Ip Kwok Him, Emily LAU, and another member, Ip Kwok Him. I'd like to follow up on my earlier question. My question was not about lengthening the period, but rather voters who have lost their voting right without knowing it, that their voting right has been cancelled. This has happened every time there is an election. Like in the last LegCo election, some voters had their eligibility preserved during a DC election but no longer at the LegCo election. Therefore, I'd like to ask you that when you publish the provisional register, you should again inform these people that they have been deleted, so they have another chance of knowing that they have been deleted. But there are people who have not changed addresses, and this has happened at every election, and I have received many complaints every time. I hope you will focus on this issue. Number 2, I agree that emails should not be used after the election. I think it will create another problem. Thank you. Okay, one question, one remark. Mr. Lee, anything to add? Thank you. Let me add something. I understand Mr. Yip's proposal. In fact, that is what we are doing. After publishing every provisional register, we will send a letter to every voter deleted that they are in the omissions list. And if they want to be reinstated, they have to act according to the statutory procedure by petitioning to us. And if there is an email address provided, we will also send the message through email. I think the message should reach such voters. But as to what actions they would like to take, it depends on whether the voter will be forthcoming in providing us with the new information so that we can reinstate them in the register. In fact, before 2012, we did not do it. But in 2012, since we saw such a big number of people who failed to reply to our inquiry letters, we in fact sent out another letter after publishing the provisional register. We also did that this year. Ms. Emily LAU, the vote rigging incidents have been quite worrying. Last year, you mounted a very big campaign to crack down on it. I hope you will do it every year. Yes, you have to remind people that you don't want to catch people who have not been guilty, but you should do more publicity to tell people that indeed they would be revealed. I'm not talking about tens of thousands every year, but please comment on this. Secondly, on environment protection. Ms. Paul Chair has always proposed that there should not be free postage because it's a waste of money, but the administration is adamant. Ms. Paul Chair is saying that you can give him the money, but in the form of vouchers. In other words, he can then get the postage money, but he can choose how to use it, and he can choose whether to post or mail information to voters. And I believe most members would choose not to send out the letters. This is for the future. This is for you to think about. You can also make reference to other places' experience. People might not want to spend the postage, whether it be 140 or 170. But Mr. Lee, can you tell me how you can do it even with more force? The chairman says if you do it with more force, you may catch wrongly the people who are innocent. Don't frighten them, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lee, we have done it in 2012 and we should strike a balance. Last year, we reviewed the registration of 1.4 million people. This year, we have reviewed 143,000 voters. And with regard to about half of them, 76,000, we're going to send out inquiry letters. And in the end, only 27,000 would have to be included in the omissions list. This is what the present situation is like. We're going to do it again next year, and if it is an election year, we will double our efforts. Our approach now is that we will continue our efforts during non-election years, and then we will double our efforts in election years. But as Ms. Lau said, we need to strike a balance. Well, Chairman, even if they just do it in a normal way, they have identified 27,000. I think the situation is quite serious, and I believe you have to make an all-out effort in order to eradicate the problem. Mr. Lee, I'd like to clarify something. The number does not mean that all these people are involved in vote rigging. Indeed, there are people who receive our inquiry letters and then they will call us up to say it's too much trouble. And also they would say, oh, now my information is in the register, but I don't want people to know my address. So there are different considerations and different reasons. Some people don't tell us they have moved house, and then there are other people who are of the view that this is a non-election year and I don't want to answer your questions this year. I don't want to be registered this year. We cannot say there are 27 or 28,000, so we come to the conclusion that there is still a lot of vote rigging potential in the register. Very often, it is about the way voters behave. Ms. Priscilla Leung, Chairman, making more effort to crack down on vote rigging has my agreement. And in fact, you let people clarify that they have just moved house. I believe you should random check more people so more people will be reminded to change their address. You said that some people may say there's too much trouble. And as far as I know, young people don't want to be voters because they are cohabiting with someone and it's about their privacy. They don't want their address to appear together with someone else's. I have been to the mainland and there are many elderly people from Hong Kong. They would like the administration to explain to them. You say writing a guideline is very complicated, but even candidates have to read a thick book of guidelines. I'm only talking about Hong Kong PR on the mainland. You can make it simple. You can say that as long as you are honest, you won't get into trouble. I think the basic requirement is honesty. There are a big number of these people, and they now do not have the incentive to get registered. How do you face up to this fact? They may not understand the very complicated situation. Even if you don't want to issue a guideline, can you do some explanation? We may go back and explore the issue further, and we can take the opportunity of the recess to learn from Ms. Priscilla Leung more what we can do to help. Maybe there are service organizations who are serving Hong Kong PRs on the mainland, and you can send people from these organizations to explain to them. Number two, I still have some time. I'd like to ask you whether you would intensify your random checking so you can prevent people from falling into a legal trap inadvertently. Mr. Lee, the random checks are done in such a way that sometimes people are inadvertently troubled because they have always changed their address and they have always voted, and suddenly you ask them for an address proof that may dampen their desire to stay on the register. So we adopt a dual-track approach. Sometimes we do random checking, or we would target certain people. Say, for example, in 2012 register in a certain constituency, if there is an upsurge in the number of voters without the completion of large-scale residential estates, then if we should detect such abnormal situations, we'll work more on these areas and random check more people in that area. Now the public are concerned about people with different surnames registering with the same address, or the address is incomplete, and also there are buildings to be demolished soon. We will target these areas. As for the random checking, we want to keep it at a minimum because we don't want to trouble people inadvertently. Right, you were in a quandary because you want more people to register and you want to keep the register accurate, and then you say this might cause people to think there's too much trouble and they don't want to stay on the register. Ms. Paul Chair, I'd just like to seek some information. Strictly speaking, it may not be about your bureau, but to convenience our next stage discussion, can you provide how many people have not changed address under the birth and death registration laws for the past 3 years? Has there ever been any prosecution because of this? If you can give me the reasons, all the better. I would propose that you seek the information through your clerk because we do not have the information. Right, this is not about the SCMA. Item 3 on the agenda. Issues in relation to display of roadside publicity materials during a district council by-election. We have 2 papers for this item. The admin's paper should be introduced by Mr. Gordon Leung. Yes, Chairman, I will take you through the paper. In 2010, during the LegCo by-election, we thought about the display of roadside publicity by incumbent DC and LegCo members, and we also sought the views of this panel in March 2010. After receiving members' views during that by-election, we allowed incumbent LegCo and DC members to continue to maintain the display of roadside publicity materials. We made that decision with a major policy consideration in mind, and that is to make sure that no candidates would be given unfair advantage. According to our observation, overall speaking, incumbent LegCo and DC members were in compliance with the rule that the relevant spots should not be used to favor a candidate or to prejudice any candidate. We believe that policy objective has been achieved. Even so, in paragraph 15 of the paper, we have said that we have more or less achieved our present policy objective. However, there is room for improvement. The REO would like to listen to members, and the REO, after having heard members' views, would discuss with relevant government departments to review the present guidelines.
To see whether the existing guidelines have to be improved. Mr. Lee, anything to add? Now, concerning the issues, now in every elections, the REO would work with the government departments, for instance, the Lands Department, LCSD, and Housing Department, to identify suitable display spots for the candidates. Now, these spots would be usually be allocated to the serving members and the relevant organizations. Now, before the 2010 DC by-elections, the relevant government departments would usually recover these display spots for the candidates. Now, for the 2010 LegCo by-elections, the CMA Bureau has conducted a review, and after consulting the panel, it's decided that in the 2010 LegCo by-election period, the existing members can continue to use the existing display spots, so that during the election period they can continue to fulfill their duties in the districts and liaise with the voters. Now, this balances two public concerns. Firstly, to maintain a fair environment for the elections, and secondly, to allow existing members to continue to maintain liaison work in their districts. There are 5 policy objectives that are listed in para 11 of the document, including no candidate should gain an unfair advantage, and public locations should be used in a way in line with public interest. Now, since the 2010 LegCo by-elections, the REO has followed this arrangement and worked with the government departments to identify suitable display spots. And overall, the operation has been smooth, and there have been isolated incidents where because there are insufficiently clear provisions, so there might be publicity at the display spots concerning the candidates. So in the allocation of display spots to serving members, there should be clear stipulations of restrictions to make clear that such spots should not be used for publicity for any candidate in the elections. Now, we would be glad to listen to members' views, and we would follow up with the CMA Bureau and government departments to make sure that the 5 objectives in para 11 can be met, and to ensure that the elections can be conducted fairly. 2 members have raised their hands, Paul Chair and Raymond Wong. 5 minutes each. Paul Chair. Now, let me touch lightly on the first part. Now, on these display banners or boards, there have been destructions or damage to these display objects recently. So we should try to stop this battle so that resources are used more or rather less wastefully, and the enforcement agencies should also pay heed. Now, the main thing is that for the 5 principles, how can they be implemented? For unfair advantage, you can never fully eliminate unfair advantages. And the document talks about political parties. It's very difficult that a candidate of a certain political party and it would be very difficult for the party not to display anything that can be inferred as supportive in other districts. So the fewer restrictions there are, the better. Otherwise, this would be artificial, and you can never really achieve full fairness. Now, that candidate might be more attractive, or he has certain backgrounds. Now, he should use whatever resources he has, and no more. Now, for the political party issue, I'd like to ask the administration, what is your preliminary thinking? Is it that in the by-elections, any publicity by political parties should be restricted? Now, under the existing system, every department concerned does not require that no publicity should be conducted during such periods. Now, before the 2010 LegCo by-elections, we recover all the display materials, so no political party or person can use such display spots for their publicity. Now, this is absolutely fair. Now, in 2010 by-elections, some members made different points of view clear. Now, as a DC member or LegCo member, now they should be allowed to do publicity. They should be allowed to, say, have a banner in the district. So one must be fair. At the same time, the elected LegCo or DC member has to fulfill certain obligations under the law. So the Bureau and the panel have agreed on this arrangement that in future by-elections, serving members can continue to make use of these allocated display spots for their work in the districts. Hopefully this would be a balance. Now, Mr. Paul Chair posed a broader issue. How about political parties? Now, we would like to listen to members' views, we and the CMA Bureau. This might involve many issues. For instance, in our society, would there be too many restrictions on freedom of speech? Mr. Paul Chair said that there shouldn't be too many. So we should be careful. If there are too many restrictions, it's not good for the elections. And at the same time, for any by-election or general election, we should try to maintain fairness. Now, Chairman, Hong Kong is a small place, and we are supposed to have advanced communications. Now, it's very difficult to make a big difference with a piece of display material in some particular spot. Mr. Raymond Wong? Now, this is a rather technical issue. It's not very controversial. One just has to be fair and open and transparent. So it's a bit of waste of time for this discussion to go ahead. And yet problems do arise in the course of it. Now, Mr. Paul Chair said that the parties should be restrained and not try to damage the posters of others. Now, well, I don't care that much about this. If my display materials are damaged, I don't think it makes much difference for my elections. But however, Paul said that you have to enforce the law. The display materials should be presented in a tidy manner. Now, concerning the posters and bills and banners, they are all under the Cap 132. There are provisions there for the display of electioneering materials. The materials should have received permission in writing, otherwise it would be illegal and there would be penalties of fines. Now, 140A of Public Health and Municipal Ordinance is not for purpose of elections. There are different upper limits for election expenditure. Now, some expenditures have a more major effect. Now, if the posters are removed in large numbers, it can be very costly. Now we have to wait for certification from the FEHD before we can be reimbursed. Now, the DC elections, the expenditure limits are different from those of these LegCo elections. Now, of course, the super DC elections are different. They have lots of money. Now, 140A has to apply to both government and private property. But this makes a difference in enforcement. For instance, in tenement buildings without owners' corporations, you have difficulty providing evidence. So candidates make use of this and unfairness occurs. Now, Priscilla Leung is probably guilty of this in what her party, in her organization does. Now, I don't put a lot of value on such materials myself. Now, also there's another provision which requires that the posters should be in a neat and orderly manner. So if it's damaged, then there should be law enforcement. In such cases, reports would be made to the police, but it would result in little being done. In 1 year, I had a poster that was torn, and an elderly person was arrested. It's criminal damage because he did it several times. Now, some people do it systematically, and this causes great nuisance and burden to candidates, and it affects the fairness of elections. So I don't care whether people tear or cut up my posters, but for many people, many candidates, they have to pay for new posters, and you might also level fines in addition. So the government has to think about that. Paragraphs 5 to 8 mention that there were previous schemes, and it didn't mention the public safety issue. Now, this has been the experience of many members. In paragraph 8, it says that for all LegCo and DC members, government departments, local non-government organizations, local mutual aid committees, residents associations, and other approved organizations with different applications may apply for the use of these spots. But there are different requirements which make it difficult to comply. For instance, in my constituency, the Nanshan Estate spots are monopolized by local DC members. Now, Pak Tin Estate and Tai Hang Tong are again entirely different. So it makes it very difficult for us to hang up our banners in these estates. Now we have some posters which we try to affix. We can say that the CE lies, but we cannot state that CY or Leung Chun Ying uses verbal tactics. Now, is it that they don't recognize Mr. CY Leung as CE?
I have records. I can show you which have been approved, which not. This is so laughable. The HD has applied political censorship. Paragraphs 10 to 12, it targets the 2012 LegCo by-election. You have now changed the law, so we cannot take part in a by-election. And now even these so-called technical issues have been changed. Well, I have nothing to say about this administration. I already stated at the beginning that technical issues are easily resolved as long as you are fair, just, and transparent. If they are just technical issues, treat them as such. Do not always play politics. Please do not second guess what your boss has in mind. What we are facing are really technical matters. I am a DC councillor, and it would mean a lot to DC candidates if they are subject to the same penalties. Their penalties should be proportional to the expansion or the expenses for the election. Mr. Lee, any response? I will respond to a few points. Mr. Wong talked about the law enforcement or approval done by the Housing Department. This is not the jurisdiction of the REO. And also whether there is consistency in law enforcement, we are quite happy to reflect the members' views to the Housing Department for consideration. Secondly, the situation where banners are damaged, it will be up to the police to enforce the law. It is a matter of criminal damage, and we can refer the matters to law enforcement agencies. And also private buildings. I don't know whether I have misunderstood Mr. Wong. The adducing of evidence must be for the user. Say if in an election he says that he has got the approval of a certain OC of a building to post up a poster, then according to the election laws, the relevant approval must be given for public inspection or must be submitted to the REO, or else he will break the law. However, this is very simple. The Housing Department can allow you to post up a poster, but not me. All of us know that we need written consent. The same goes for PLBs. But some people don't follow the rules, and they don't put it up for the public's inspection. They would wait for their opponents to report on them. You just go into a market and you will know it is a very messy situation. The thing is, in private buildings, some candidates are allowed to do publicity but not others. This is a very old problem, Mr. Lee. Well, this has no direct relation to the paper under discussion. Well, never mind. I can skip that point. Mr. Lee, any more points? Well, yes, in passing. Let's say this is all in passing. Actually, the returning officer has stipulated that these owner-managers must make use of an open process to give approval or otherwise, and they cannot favor certain candidates. No, I'm talking about tenement buildings without owners incorporations. Well, then, that it depends whether there is any management agency in a building. And if a certain owner allows the candidate to put up a poster, then it can be a problem because the candidate himself has to cite from where the approval is given. So the responsibility still lies with the tenement building. As for banners and publicity boards which have been removed by the FEHD and the cost will be recovered, well, according to our arrangement with the FEHD, we'll stipulate that within a certain period of time, maybe within 2 weeks, the relevant cost must be notified to the people concerned, because candidates would have to declare the expenses, or else they will be breaking the ECICO. I will go back and look at the time limit. If necessary, I will take this up with the FEHD again to see whether we can speed up the process. The meeting should end at 4:30, but Ms. Priscilla Leung has raised her hand. I will allow her to ask the question. Anything else from other members? If not, after Ms. Leung has asked her question, the meeting will be adjourned. Ms. Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I thank Mr. Wong Yok-man for mentioning me. Well, but you step in my shoes and you will know my posters have also been torn down once they were put up. Every time I put up a poster, it would disappear. As for banners and other publicity boards that have been criminally damaged, we have come across that more often than not. But I think a more serious issue is that the banners might be stolen and the pull-up posters have been stolen, and we had to report to the police. Some residents who are very friendly to us would actually tell us that our banners had been stolen. There was a case that was cracked, but then we did not want to follow up because we did not know why the person stole the banner. I think many people have come across this. I have had 2 pull-up posters stolen, and these are serious matters. But then we had to report to the police in one case. During the election, candidates should abide by the law. I have stood in elections many times, and I think we should openly look at one matter. It seems our election laws do not encourage publicity. We are those who are very much in compliance with the law. But you always take us to task, because if we are late by 1 day, in terms of removing the banners, we will be penalized with a fine of $300. But then there are people who were allowed to keep their posters there 2 weeks beyond the time limit. Is it that if they put up a more fierce fight, you would tolerate them more? Now, I don't want to cite names arbitrarily, but I think I have expressed the same view on the district level. Many times, it seems you apply double standards about the removal of banners. It seems you are particularly strict with people like us. Also, last year, I could cite names. Mr. James Toh said openly that I complained against their banners, saying that there were political slogans, and so the Housing Department did not allow him to put up the posters. But in the end, after the investigation, it was found that it was not me but another from the Pan-Democratic camp. I hope the Pan-Democrats would not always say that whenever there is a complaint, it must have been made by a pro-establishment member. And in the end, he felt sorry about what he said, but I did not ask him for an open apology. I think the problem is that there is bureaucracy at the Housing Department. And when it comes to political publicity, it has caused the dissatisfaction of a lot of candidates. I think you should look into it, because now things are too rigid. It does not add to the convenience of doing multi-kind of publicity. Any response, Mr. Lee? I can relate your views to the Housing Department for its consideration. And as to the election laws, I'd like to clarify that it's not that we do not encourage publicity, but we just want to have a fair playing field. So we put in these restrictions so that there will be a level playing field. But as to the implementation of the standards, maybe there is room for improvement. We'll pay attention. And later on, we can liaise better with the returning officers in elections. So on a district level, when the law is enforced, we hope that there will be consistency and fairness. We'll be quite happy to take another look. Okay, we have to close the meeting. This is the last meeting of this session. I'd like to thank members for attending meetings. We will see you again after the summer recess. We will constitute the panel again. I'd like to thank you for assisting with the work and also the Secretariat throughout the year. Thank you very much. The meeting is closed here.